Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the WrestleWatch podcast. This is Ryan here.
And I'm Doug.
And we have a interesting episode coming up here. We're of course going to be talking about all of the changes to the WrestleWatch Tier List that tracks the wrestlers' movements for free agency. But we also have a few discussions to be had about a comment that SRS made about how TKO looks at future contracts of certain individuals on the WWE roster, and also a discussion about Stardom and everything that's going on there. Where do you want to start there, Doug?
I think we could dive right into. Why don't we start with the TKO comments, just because I think that they are the most closely aligned to what we try to talk about here on this podcast, and that's just trying to gauge the real world value of some talent relative to, other promotions and how they would see them. And I think these comments are interesting. I like to break them down a little bit and kind of piece it apart.
Yeah, and it kind of nicely dovetails off of the conversation we had last week at the end of the episode about the Magnificent Seven and about your flow chart that you go through for determining the likelihood of somebody staying with a promotion or jumping to another one.
Absolutely.
So the comments that we're talking about in question here are something from the Fightful Select Q&A yesterday with Sean Ross Sapp. He was asked about how TKO is viewing upcoming free agents, and he said he's been told by TKO that, which of course is the umbrella company that owns WWE and UFC, TKO doesn't view anyone as indispensable within WWE at the current moment. This is kind of a big deal for what we look at, right?
Yeah, this is. We've talked on this a few times now, and I think we've mentioned that we feel that this is probably the case in a lot of situations. Brian, do you think this is the case in every situation? Is this accurate, first of all?
Is it accurate? I think in the context of contract negotiations and how they're going to be perceiving future coming up free agents, I think that it's saying like TKO is not going to be used as a punching bag in a bidding war. That's what they're trying to say, I feel like. Do I think that that's going to be true in every situation? Personally, I don't think it's going to be true in every single situation. How do you feel?
Yeah, I also kind of have to wonder why this comment came out. I mean, I didn't watch the actual Q&A. I don't know what the question was that actually led to this being brought up, but I do have to wonder, because here's the first thing. I think there's a leverage play going to be happening here regardless, because what we're looking at right now is a situation where talent has a lot more leverage now than they ever did, which is why WWE tried to kill AEW in the cradle, and I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean that like in terms of this is, business and this is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And the thing that really sticks out to me is looking at how brazen some talent are in terms of just going places and being seen places in a way they were not comfortable doing maybe 5 years ago. So looking at the recent Big Business show where you have Bailey, you have Tamina, Naomi openly being supportive of Mercedes to the point where there is video of them backstage at the AEW show showing support. Bailey at New Japan shows just in the crowd. These are things that if the talent did this 5 years ago, they would be punished.
Yeah.
And they are not being punished right now because they have the leverage.
Yeah, they do.
And I wonder if this. And I wonder if this is going to be almost like a play where TKO is trying to pull back some of that leverage.
Yeah, and I think that what you were speaking about of the past few years here and the development of the free agency scene for the first time since the late 90s, for the first time in 25 years, really, that we've really had a free agency market in wrestling. Of course, when AEW was starting up, as you mentioned, they were trying to WWE was trying to kind of strangle them in the crib, so to speak. And they threw out a lot of contracts to people that might not have been the kinds of people that they would have signed in the past. just to keep them off of AEW's roster. And what happened was, of course, when a bunch of them got released or their contracts came up in around 2021, a lot of them wound up going to AEW anyway. When we're talking about stuff like like Adam Cole, for example, is a good example of somebody that like he just went to AEW once it became an option for him. No ifs, ands, or buts. He would just like this is where I want to go. But it's an interesting. Excuse me. It's an interesting thing when we're looking at kind of looking at your flow chart of that question of for this example, will WWE pay more than AEW is willing to pay in order to keep them from joining AEW? And it seems like from this quote, from this position that TKO is having, the answer is no. They're not going to be willing to go back on it. They're not going to be willing to do the bigger contract on that scenario.
Yeah, and the thing that I always think about too is when AEW first launched and they tried to just pay a bunch of people to keep them away.
Mm-hmm.
That seemed to be a move, as we said, to try to kill AEW before it started. And once it became clear that that wasn't going to happen, that's when they just started cutting all these people. And they said, well, this failed, so I'm not going to be paying all this money to keep these people around when the whole reason I wanted to keep them around was to keep this thing from getting off the ground.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I see the logic in TKO going back to that, where they're just going to start paying people to keep them away from AEW. And I think, in theory, this is what TKO would like. They would like to have a situation where the stuff that they're putting in practice, like the Performance Center pipeline, even like the NIL talent, or where they're essentially creating people from the ground up, that would be ideal for them, because then they are creating talent that WWE is the only thing that he ever knew. They feel comfortable there, and by that nature, they would be less likely to be flight risks, because I think that's the big thing that WWE has learned over the last 5 years, is that if you came from the outside, you are more likely to jump and go to AEW or any other promotion. But at the same time, the issue is those talent are generally the talent that are better, for lack of a better word, and they're the ones who end up getting pushed because they just gravitate to the crowd more because they know how to do it. They've worked in a lot of different places. They have a lot more experience in professional wrestling as a whole. They're more well-rounded. So I think there's certain situations where WWE right now is trying to control that. You see some of the people they're pushing now. Dom, I think, is probably the best example. Like, they would love to just have Dom be the biggest star in the company, because I don't know that he's someone who would thrive outside of WWE. He might, but I don't know. But the perfect example that kind of came to mind, and this really kind of encapsulates the difference between AEW and WWE and what they're looking for and what they're doing right now. If you took Hook and Dom, Hook in AEW, Dom in WWE, I think they're both similar in certain ways. Both the same age, both second generation wrestlers, both talent that were really kind of fostered by their home companies. But if you offered an even trade where WWE would get WWE would get Hook and AEW would get Dom, I think both promotions would absolutely say no and think that's a bad deal.
I disagree on the Hook part, honestly, because I think that the way that AEW has booked him is kind of sports entertaining, to be quite honest.
You disagree in the sense that you think WWE would like Hook?
Yeah, I think they would.
More than Dom?
No, not more than Dom, but like if there was a scenario where WWE could sign Hook, I think they would. If there was a scenario where AEW could sign Dominic, I don't think they would.
You're right, but that's a different thing. So my question is, if we're
about a trade, a straight
up trade, I think both companies would turn that down.
Yeah, in that scenario, because I think that the bigger hinge on that is honestly that WWE values Dominic far more than AEW would value Dominic.
Yes, I think that AEW values Hook far more than WWE would value Hook.
Possibly. Yeah, I think that the way that Hook is being presented currently is not the way that it's more in line in the style of how WWE develops a star rather than the way that AEW's top stars have been developed. Um, because he's not doing 5-star classics kind of a thing. He's not doing like intriguing promos. He's not part of any faction. He's just one dude with kind of at times a comedy gimmick. And you can take him seriously in the ring enough, but like it's not as like straight nose hard nose of a gimmick as the way that they present like Takeshita, for example. When he came in, he got over quickly. He was being put in big matches quickly, long matches quickly, all those kinds of things. Of course, there's an age difference, there's an experience difference, all those kinds of things too. But I'm just like thinking of examples of people that have gotten over from their ring work in AEW and looking at it vis-a-vis Hook. That might be more my personal take on the matter.
Yeah, and I think that's the situation. We don't know exactly how these people would be presented in the other company, but as we understand them, I
Yeah,
would argue that I'll just stand by this. I would argue that both companies wouldn't take that even trade.
yeah,
And and the reason I bring that up is it just demonstrates this idea that these companies have different priorities now. AEW is prioritizing. They are in a position where they'll prioritize the in-ring workers, whereas WWE they're a publicly traded company. They're gonna prioritize the bottom line at this point, whereas
yeah.
PK may not. At some point he may, but right now he's still in that mode where he's trying to build up his company and try to make it stable, where WWE is in a situation where they're trying to maintain the stock price and they're trying to maintain a certain level of the labor budget. They're a publicly traded company. They have a very public labor budget. They are
Hmm.
not in a situation where they can blow that up.
Yeah.
And and let's be honest, if they did lose, because going back to this original question, who is uh irreplaceable in WWE?
Oh, indispensable. Yeah.
Indispensable. Who is
Um,
indispensable?
well, like honestly, you can look at the WrestleMania card a little bit when you're thinking about this. Because I think that the types of people that WWE might look as indispensable are essentially it's Roman is the number one easy answer, right? Like undeniably, that's the kind of person that they're just going to make sure that he stays, you know, um, because they view him as being so valuable to what they've built. He's a homegrown guy. He's a big name. He's the big draw. He's Roman. When you look at other people in WWE right now, and this kind of dovetails a little bit on what you were saying about their development strategy of trying to develop people from the ground up, make them stars within the WWE system rather than bringing outside people in. Uh, you have somebody like Cody Rhodes facing Roman, which he kind of did that Drew McIntyre path of going away, proving himself, coming back. But he is super important, I think, to the way that they're currently developed their main roster and their brand. Um, Other names that could be thrown out there, in my opinion, a Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair, possibly Seth Rollins, and that's where it starts to get a little murky in what I would look at on this tier of people. That's kind of like the borderline person is Seth Rollins, I think,
Okay.
because especially when we're looking at the way that he's getting booked, looking at just how this quote might be kind of about his contract and Becky Lynch's contracts coming up.
Yeah, and I think that well, starting with like Seth Rollins, for example, if he left tomorrow or if Becky left tomorrow, would we see a noticeable negative impact in television ratings or ticket sales at all?
Well, the interesting thing about Becky, of course, is that when she did the NXT run and then she left, there was a noticeable difference. But I think on the main roster, the way that they've set up the main roster right now, with filling in other people, starting to cycle through people, I don't think Becky Lynch right now today is that indispensable person. I think she definitely was, though. She was that person.
Yes.
She
And
was the man, so to speak.
yeah, and I'll push back a little bit on the because I this is a very common, feather in Becky's cap, and not to take anything away from her whatsoever, but I do think there is a difference from being a noticeable draw on Raw or SmackDown, which is already has a very high baseline for viewership, and going to NXT, which has a much larger people who kind of keep an eye on it, but don't necessarily watch it every week. It's a lot easier to pop a number there. And I don't know how much stock I really put in bumping an NXT number as opposed to, bumping a big number on Raw, like uh, how the Bloodline storyline has done.
Okay.
So I think that would be my one kind of pause on that. Not a major pause, but just I would like to think on that a little bit more.
Okay. Okay.
And
That's fair.
but going back, so this idea that these people are indispensable, I maybe they are, and I think that they genuinely treat Roman like he is, and I think that the reason he is pushed as well as he is, not the only reason, but I think that they know that he is a soldier for the
Hmm.
company. He's a loyal guy. He's the family has strong connections to WWE and always has.
Yeah.
So that is largely could be why he was kind of selected as the guy that they're going to grow and run with. And
Yeah.
that's completely understandable. And so in their minds, they probably feel that they don't need to worry about him. And that's why he's getting the big push.
Yeah.
Cody, on the other hand, is a guy who absolutely already left. He already walked out on them because he was angry and built himself up. He's definitely doing a much better job of kind of presenting himself as the company man. He clearly wants to be the company man,
Yeah.
but I have to wonder, it's like, do they completely trust him?
Mm.
I think they do. I think they do, but I do think there's part of me that does kind of like in the back of my head think, he might go back to AEW one day.
Oh yeah, yeah. He has to finish the story somehow, and
Yeah.
if he can't do it in WWE, well, maybe he'll do it by winning a different title.
Yes, and I part of me wonders, are there people in WWE who maybe think that
Hmm.
and maybe aren't necessarily as keen on pushing him, but they have
Yeah,
to push him because he's their biggest babyface right now by a mile. Like it's
yeah,
absurd how over he is. And
yeah. I
it's
mean, yeah, like it's like they were teasing out trying to do Rock versus Roman, and people flipped the hell out because it wasn't going to be Cody.
yes.
Which is crazy when you think about the fact that like for the past like decade, people were like, "Come on, just do it, just do Rock Roman." It's the one thing that like, especially in the early phase of things when Roman was being like this over pushed face mode, it was like the one thing that people were like, you know what, we tune in for that, and it is their biggest money match period, obviously.
But
But
in
people were still wanting Cody. People were still wanting Cody.
Yeah, and then here's the question though. When Cody's contract is up,
Yeah,
what is he going to ask for?
everything.
And is WWE going to give him everything? Is
That's
TKO going to give him everything?
yeah, that's the big question, and that's where it comes into essentially on that flowchart point where it like this is the dividing thing about what TKO is saying right now versus when you were thinking about that flowchart of yours. The third question is, of course, will the home promotion, in this case WWE, be willing to pay more than the other promotion AEW to keep that person to make sure that they don't join the other company? And I think it's of all the names that we've talked about right now in this little block here, we talked about Roman, Cody, Becky, Seth. I think that Roman is obviously yes. I think TKO would 100% pay him more to make sure he doesn't leave. Cody, I kind of think they would try to. I think that they would put in an honest effort to keep Cody around because he's their number one merch guy. He's their biggest baby face that they've had in years. Um, I mean, other than Sami Zayn's moment last year or 2 years ago now. Um, Becky, at this point, I think a few years ago, I think they would have done that. But right now, yeah, I think it's getting into that indispensable conversation of like, well, is she indispensable right now in this moment for WWE's plans? And with the women's roster, not not really right now. And then when we talked about Seth, yeah, I think that he's the kind of person where WWE might be looking at him and saying, well, we could pay him a lot, but like we could move on to someone else at this point.
Yeah. And then in terms of indispensable, I mean, whether or not we want to use that word, let's just use the word that Sean Ross Sapp used. But
Yeah,
uh, I think at this point, looking at negotiations and where we're at, I think Cody has way more leverage than Roman. I think if Cody wanted to push it, he could get probably the better deal. I
yeah,
think he could. I mean, I think WWE would like Roman to be the bigger star, but in reality and in practice, that's just not the case. I think
yeah,
Cody is the guy. Cody is in a situation where he can ask for the moon,
yeah,
and because the bottom line is, after everything they've done with Cody, the optics of him leaving WWE and going back to AEW is so foul and rancid for WWE to even imagine, I would think, that they absolutely are going to avoid that. I think it would be worse than Roman jumping to AEW. And I not to say that I think Roman's going to do that, but I just think like from an optics standpoint and how the presentation of the company, I think it would look really bad for WWE if Cody jumped back.
yeah.
And it would be one of the most interesting stories because of all the stuff that they could do with Cody in AEW.
Yeah, yeah, like this is an interesting thing because it's getting into that conversation a little bit of that we were talking about kind of last week with Mercedes Moné and the things that Okada and Ospreay had both mentioned was when you're looking at this wrestling free agency landscape right now, the conversation is kind of becoming the AEW side is we're going to give you money and we're going to give you the freedom to work outside of this particular promotion. You can work other promotions, you can go over all the other world, you can go and do fashion shows, you can act in movies and TV shows. We're going to let you have a free reign to do whatever you want. Look at how Mercedes is doing things in those kinds of regards. Look at Samoa Joe and Twisted Metal, things like that. You're given the free reign to go and do what you want outside of Wednesday and Saturdays. Hopefully, you're here on site for us.
But then
Uh,
you, but then I have to ask myself, is WWE seeing that now? And is that why we're suddenly seeing Shayna Baszler working Bloodsport on WrestleMania weekend?
that's the kind of thing where it's like I think my personal take on the Shayna Baszler thing is they weren't going to use her anyway, so why not keep her happy by just saying yes to this one thing this one time?
Yeah.
You look, it's like some people were trying to tease out like, oh, it's not just one person, oh, it's not, and it's like, well, lo and behold, it's one person.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
it's Shayna Baszler and Josh Barnett who are
yeah,
like basically like a father-daughter situation to begin
yeah.
with. So it might be a genuinely very unique thing. Like if I see, Dom on Joey Janela's spring break, then we'll come back to this and talk again.
That would be actually that would work very well, I think.
It probably would.
But but yeah, so when we're looking at the verses here, it's the money and freedom kind of argument for AEW, and then WWE's argument right now is looking at the bigger platform that they can give to somebody, and those third party deals that they can give of commercials and things like that, sponsorships, endorsements, all those kinds of things, and that is WWE's wheelhouse is we're going to take care of you on those kinds of things. We're going to get you those opportunities. We're going to get you in with Slim Jim. We're going to get you in with Boost Mobile or whatever other companies that they're working with right now. AEW doesn't actively really work on that. It's all about the independence of the wrestler to find those opportunities if they want them.
But,
So,
but and even those opportunities that WWE is getting them, they're still getting them through them, and they're still going to be tied
yes,
to WWE. So that
yes.
in itself is kind of a tricky situation because it's almost like you're not getting these opportunities. WWE is leasing these opportunities to you.
Yeah, but like that could be that's the kind of thing where we're looking at the pipeline a little bit too of well, if you're somebody that's from outside the WWE pipeline, you might look at that and be like you could look at it two ways. You could look at it as I've been working my way up for years and I haven't broken through getting those opportunities. WWE can get me those opportunities. I'm going to go to WWE. Or you could look at it as I've been independent my entire time and look at where I'm at. Why do I need them?
Hmm.
So it depends. It's a interesting thing to look at on a case by case basis for each individual talent, I think.
Yeah. And then the
um
third one is the talent who are in WWE right now who have taken advantage of these things,
yes.
eventually say, I don't really need them anymore. My brand has been built up enough that I can go off and do this on my own. They're a
Yeah.
middleman that I do not need anymore, which I think is what a big part of came into Mercedes Moné's decision.
Yes, yes. And something that I wanted to kind of dovetail on this conversation was kind of analogizing it to the NFL quarterback market. Are you familiar with how that kind of worked in the past couple years here?
Very
Uh,
little. So I would
okay.
appreciate you going through it so I
Yeah,
can.
so the analogy essentially is that every year it seems like there's somebody that has a big money contract, like a big time quarterback is about to have their contract expire, and now they need to renegotiate with the team that drafted them to see if they can, you know, figure out a contract for them, see if they're valuable enough to them, and if they can work out a price. Every single year, the contract now gets the conversation gets reset. So it's like last year, we had, or 2 years ago. Let me go back a little bit further. We had Deshaun Watson go. He got traded to the Browns in what was considered a very bad trade by all accounts, and they gave him a ridiculous amount of money. And people were saying, "Is this going to reset the market?" This is the conversation that we talked about with Mercedes Moné. Is her contract resetting the market of what we're looking at for a women's wrestler?
Hmm,
Then
okay.
and then after that, then the next big quarterback that comes up is Lamar Jackson of the Ravens. And the conversation then is, well, Deshaun Watson got this, and Lamar, well, Deshaun never won MVP. Lamar Jackson's won MVP. He's doing things that Deshaun Watson never did. He's a bigger deal than Deshaun Watson. So shouldn't his contract be then bigger than his? The answer was Deshaun Watson's contract was an aberration, and the market reset itself to what now Lamar wanted, which was a little bit less than what Deshaun Watson got, but still it was more than what other players were getting at that point. What the 2019 cycle was, what the 2018 cycle was. Each year's cycle kind of builds off each other. So the conversation that happens then for these teams is this is kind of a flow chart on its own, is how elite is this person? Do they deserve to be the best paid person in the league?
Hmm.
So that kind of gets into what we're talking about, analogizing to Mercedes Moné. Is Mercedes Moné quote unquote elite, and does she deserve to be the best paid person in your league, your promotion? And I think the answer had been yes in the free agency world. She's proven it already a little bit, and I think she's going to prove it a lot coming up here. Now, the flip side of that is looking at your own roster and when you're trying to re-sign somebody, not a free agent. Um, so, like, let's say, like Seth Rollins, for example, we can game out Seth Rollins. How elite is Seth Rollins, and do they deserve to be the best paid person in WWE? Right now, maybe not. Roman Reigns is obviously the best paid person. He should be right now. He's the biggest draw. Even in the conversation of Seth's position on the roster, you're looking at how they're booking him, and they're kind of having the world heavyweight title not be as big of a deal. They're kind of putting it on same level at times as the intercontinental title. So you have to look at now. The second question is, could they be replaced easily enough with a cheaper and or younger talent if they're let to walk? The answer for Seth Rollins is yeah, you could replace him with a cheaper or younger talent. You can look at exactly the comparison I just made to the intercontinental title, and you could see you could have Gunter in the position that Seth Rollins is on your card right now, and people wouldn't notice it as much. It's that indispensable quality that is from that quote there. It's that, Seth isn't indispensable at this moment because he can be replaced right now. Whereas Roman, for example, he couldn't be easily replaced by somebody cheaper or younger. You'd have to build up somebody for a decade to get them up to Roman's level, or spend, a couple years on somebody like Braun Breaker to really focus on him to get him up to where Roman is at. So, with Roman, he is indispensable because of that. You can't replace him.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think you're right. And the one thing I will say though, um,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the quarterback, so the idea that like all these teams want the best quarterback, they're willing to pay for the best players.
Yeah.
For AEW and WWE, it's interesting and it's weird because at least in the world of professional wrestling as it exists right now, what AEW and what WWE are looking for are not necessarily always the same thing. So
Yeah.
like I do think when in terms of a reset, did Mercedes reset the market? Yeah, I think so in the sense that uh if there's a talent that AEW and WWE both really want and are willing to pay for, I think that Mercedes has set that new standard. But
Hmm.
just because that happened for Mercedes, I agree. I don't know that it's necessarily going to happen for everyone else because it depends on if uh, AEW wants someone in WWE or someone.
Yeah.
And so you take a look at someone like Roman for an example. When his contract is up, I don't know that he has the same leverage because, okay, would AEW kick the tires on Roman Reigns? Yeah, I think so, but I don't know that he's necessarily as valuable to AEW for what the price that they would need to pay to get
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So they may not even like necessarily go that hard for him, and I think WWE may know that. So he may not necessarily have as much leverage
Yeah.
compared to someone like Cody, where I think WWE would absolutely kill for Cody to stay, and I think AEW would absolutely kill to get him back.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the big reset. Seth though is going to be an interesting one just because I don't necessarily know. Like we're going to learn a lot from Seth Rollins.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think when we're talking about Cody, the thing that's interesting to me is when I think about these two questions of how quote unquote elite are they, and you're saying about like the perception between the two promotions, how maybe one promotion might see somebody valued a little bit more than the other promotion. Like, for example, Okada, he might be valued a little bit more by Tony Khan than he is by TKO, you know. For the way and the style of the presentation, what their team is looking for when they're building their roster, so to speak. But with Cody, could they easily be replaced by somebody cheaper or younger of talent? Right now, not really. I don't think within with what in is excuse me with what is within the WWE system at the current moment. I don't think that they could easily, cheaply, or younger can bring in somebody that's cheaper or younger than Cody and put him in the same position right now, tomorrow, or develop them within a year. I don't think that that's the case right now for him. And there's the combo of I think both AEW and WWE look at him as somebody that is top tier right now, that they would both be desiring to have.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that this might be. Oh, what's an interesting thing to think about with this? Who do you think are the WWE indispensable people? Did you touch on that?
The ones I think are indispensable.
Yeah.
I think it's really just Cody and Roman, and I'm even questioning them.
Gotcha.
Because I generally don't know that WWE would see a massive financial backlash from them. And I think that more than anything, like WWE and TKO are willing to take a gamble on letting them go
Hmm.
and seeing what they got, especially with the fact that they now have this super long term already set in place and Netflix deal. And
Yeah.
I don't know that they necessarily have any real risk factors in losing them at this point.
How do you feel about when we flip it over to AEW? How do you feel like there's anybody within AEW that Tony Khan is looking at as an indispensable person, that kind of franchise quarterback kind of person that you couldn't easily replace with somebody cheaper or younger if they walked?
I think it would be very jarring if AEW All Elite Wrestling did not have the Elite. I think that
Gotcha.
those are the big. So I think Young Bucks and Omega.
Hmm.
They've got them locked down now, but I think that's maybe that was a uh, uh, a foundational flaw in this company by naming it the company after like some talent that they now must keep. And
Yeah.
because they already technically did lose one of them with Cody, but I think a lot of people
Yeah.
kind of always saw Cody as sort of an add-on to the Elite since he came in kind of later on.
Yeah. He wasn't
But
a core member per se.
Yeah, but I think if they lost the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and All Elite Wrestling did not have the Elite, I think that is a a fatal, no, I don't want to say fatal. That's too strong, but that's a big problem. And I think
Yeah.
that especially since AEW itself is still a very young company, they're not as established. They don't necessarily have the ability to be as secure as WWE with its, decades of
Hmm.
built-in audience. So I think
Yes.
that AEW still they're they're getting more secure because they've been
Yes.
around a while, but they still have not, built that, generational audience that
Yeah.
WWE has. So I think
Yeah.
that they do need to be a little bit more cognizant of that, and that's why I think that talent in AEW have more leverage because I do think that Tony Khan does not have the same uh, privileges that WWE has in being able to just walk away from the table with certain talents. He can with a lot, but I don't
Hmm.
know that he can do with all of them. And
Yeah.
I
This
do
is
think, yeah,
yeah, this is the kind of problem for a challenger brand when they're trying to establish themselves is, of course, making it feel normal that they exist, making it not just, oh yeah, we're the hot new product, and come and look at us right now because we're hot and new. Making it so that it's you grew up also watching us and also understanding that we exist and are an option. Um, so that's something that's like it's only been a handful of people, and they're all like 18 right now. That's the case for when you look at like Nick Wayne or Billy Starks, where they've said, "Oh yeah, I grew up watching AEW," and it's like, "Oh wow, yeah, it's that's true for you a little bit." Yeah, when you were getting into high school, AEW was a thing.
yes.
It's not a foreign concept to you, but it hasn't solidified yet for what we're talking about of that these kinds of town that we're looking at of are you an indispensable person? Are you somebody that we couldn't replace? That kind of talent. It hasn't gotten to that point yet because AEW just isn't as established yet because it hasn't been around for long enough yet.
And if AEW signs another 5-year deal with Warner Brothers, the next time they're up for negotiation again will be probably 2029.
Yeah,
There will be 18-year-olds who were 8 or 9 years old when AEW launched.
yes, that will legitimately be looking at it and saying, I legitimately, when I was a kid, I was little Darby, I guess would be the thing. Not a little Stinger anymore. We're little OC, with the
Yep,
thumbs up. And they'd
absolutely.
be looking at that, and they'll bring their photos from when they met Orange Cassidy and start a rivalry with them. Like MJF seems to have from the woodwork with every single person on the roster. It's kind of crazy. Now, I will mention two more names that I think are indispensable for AEW. Possibly, I think John Moxley and Bryan Danielson are approaching that level for the company. I think it will be very hard for them when this year is over to replace Danielson in his spot on the roster.
Well, they have no choice.
Yeah, they have
So,
no choice, of course, but like he is that kind of person, I think.
okay.
Especially with how he works backstage. But um, anyway, I think we've had a really good talk there about this indispensable conversation, and it sets the scene up for a few of our changes to the tier list. How about we take a little break? Does that work for you, Doug?
Sounds good.
All right, we will be right back with the WrestleWatch podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the WrestleWatch podcast. This is Ryan with a freshly brewed cup of coffee.
Yeah, mine as well.
Awesome. How about we go through the tier list?
All right. So this is the tier list as of March 23rd, 2024. I'm just going to read through it quickly, and then after we do that, we'll run through the adjustments and changes that have happened throughout the last week. So currently at S tier, we have Black Taurus, we have Camille, and then we have Tama Tonga. At A tier, we have Mustafa Ali, Julia, and Tekla. At B tier, we have Dustin Rhodes, Leo Rush, Sheamus, Jacob Fatu, Grizzled Young Veterans, Mike Santana, Shelton Benjamin, and Motor City Machine Guns. C tier, we have Ricky Starks, Wardlow, Sami Callihan, Kevin Owens, Kato Kiyomiya, Katsuhiko Nakajima, Finn Balor, and Seth Rollins. At D tier, we have Cody Rhodes, Malachi Black, Buddy Matthews, Matt Cardona, Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre. And then at F tier, we have MJF, Syuri, El Fantasmo, Daniel Garcia, Max Caster, and then Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy.
Yeah, so it sounds like we've deleted a few names from the tier list and we've added a few names from the tier list. Who do you want to start with? The names that are no longer on the tier list or ones that are new?
Why don't we just start with, hang on, let me pull this up real quick. I would say let's start with the people who have, I guess we change up. Let's start with the people who have been deleted. Let's do that first. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, so the first name that's been knocked off the tier list this week was Jack Perry. So, Doug, how were you feeling on the discussion regarding Jack Perry? Were you in favor of taking him off the tier list?
Yeah, I'm fine with taking him off the list at this point. I think that there's been a lot. I don't need to go into all the news surrounding Jack Perry this week because obviously there's a lot, but essentially he's been firmly at New Japan right now, but it's very clear that he is still under contract with AEW.
Yes.
There was talk of that he requested his release, and then that was refuted. And then there was talk that he apologized to Tony Khan, that was refuted. So it's just a lot of like work shoot stuff going on. And I'm not really, I don't really want to go into the weeds with that. But I think regardless, it's very clear that, first of all, Tony Khan also said that, he's doing great things over in New Japan. It's very clear that he's under AEW contract and he is working in New Japan to kind of reset after everything that happened with CM Punk and then to eventually be brought back at some point. I think that that's clearly what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I have no reason to believe that he is going to leave the company or request to leave the company. And if he does, I don't see him jumping to WWE after what happened. So I understand why everyone just said get him off the tier list. It seems kind of silly at this point. So yeah, I understand completely.
Yeah, that was my take was I was in favor personally of keeping him on the tier list at F tier because I still thought, maybe there's still an outside chance. Maybe there's still, but yeah, with how this week has gone with the discussion about Jack, but the main thing for me is that he actually came out and refuted most of the claims that were being said about him about, requesting his release and all these other things, and even said that Rocky Romero and Tony Khan helped him get settled into New Japan for this current run. So, which is that's a big thing for somebody that's currently working a character that is the scapegoat and being a member of House of Torture. I feel like that's a big thing for him to go out and have to say, like, hey, kayfabe aside, I know I'm the scapegoat, but I kind of worked with the guy that's scapegoating me. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. It's like, come on. Like, he's not leaving. He's not released. He's still under AEW contract. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, and I have no reason to believe that he's leaving at this point, especially considering it's like his options are WWE where CM Punk is at right now, or TNA where they might be going to a pay per pay-per appearance deal, so we'll see. I don't really feel like going into that this week because I think we might touch on it, but I'm not going to go super deep into it. We need to see what happens first.
Yeah, I think we have to let it play out on the TNA stuff, although we will talk about some people from TNA in a moment here. But yeah, and also the other option for Jack, of course, is New Japan, where he's currently kind of working, but it's obviously on a deal with AEW. He's working very well in New Japan. He's getting great reactions from the crowd. His work with Shota Umino has been outstanding, in my opinion. I think that's probably the best stuff of the House of Torture versus Shota rivalry. Is that? But it's also like, hey, look, we sent Jack Perry to New Japan to work with one of the 3 or 4 next generation stars of New Japan that is noted as the quote unquote protege of the ace of AEW. It's like, come on.
and not only that, they're already teasing Anna Jay potentially joining Empress Nexus Venus, which is Mina Shirakawa's faction, kind of the successor to Club Venus.
Yes.
They had a match on ROH. They've been kind of talking with each other on social media. It seems like they might be working an angle. Wouldn't shock me to see Anna Jay go over to Japan for a bit too.
Yeah. I think that when we're this might be a little bit more like looking at the tea leaves a little bit, but it seems that Jack Perry is going to probably stay doing this work in New Japan at least to Windy City Riot. He said that he's going to be on the card for that, possibly through to Forbidden Door to continue this story of battling Shota and possibly tying it into Blackpool Combat Club in AEW, his kind of quasi faction when he does work with AEW. And yeah, so if Jack's going to be there for a little bit, and if Anna's looking like she's going to go over there, it's like, hey, yeah, wow, we've really punished this guy by sending him his girlfriend.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's very clear to me that uh, this is all just storyline. It's all an angle. And let's be
Yeah.
honest, I think Anna Jay would really benefit
Oh
from
yeah.
working in Stardom.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I'm sure they offered it to her and said, "Hey, you want to like, regardless, like leaving Jack Perry out of this completely.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm not because like I don't want to like make it like oh she's going over there just to be with Jack, but I do think she's someone who would really benefit from just working Stardom for a bit, and she's young. She's got a strong prospect. They really believe in pushing her. I think that they would love to have her over there for a couple months.
Yeah. No, I've noted in my personal reviews and taste of Anna Jay's matches this year, she has been improving a lot. Her match with Hikaru Shida earlier this year on Rampage went really well, I thought. And her match with Deanna Purrazzo on Dynamite went well, and this match with Mina was pretty good. And I think that this could be a good direction for Anna to develop herself more, to go over to Stardom, because it's worked great for the talent that have gone to Stardom that are in AEW currently.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and we'll get into Stardom later here. But how about
So real quick, I
go
just
ahead?
realized. So we have the other two deletes are actually Stardom talent.
Yeah,
Let's save them to the end because then I can kind of
yes.
segue into another discussion.
Yeah, so how about we save those two for the end, but how about we pick up two that got added to the tier list that are currently with AEW. That'll be a good transition point. It's Matt and Jeff Hardy of all people. So what's the situation going on with Matt Hardy in particular is that for the past few weeks there have been conversations in the press about perhaps his contract is going to be coming up soon. The Fightful Select noted that technically he is still under AEW contract. The two sides have been working on a dialogue trying to figure out something with the contract there. But he's kind of, been posting some things of like, yeah, thank you AEW fans for everything you've been doing. This week he was seen at WWE's Raw event. Of course, that was take it with a grain of salt that it was his wife had a friend with a box seat with a sweet box at Raw. They popped in, said hello to their friends. That's more so what happened than the Bailey level at Big Business being backstage, which of course was also just for friends. It wasn't like any kind of like oh they're getting in league behind the scenes. But how do you feel about the Matt Hardy stuff?
So with the Matt Hardy thing, so first of all, just to be clear, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy were both off the tier list. They are now on F tier.
Oh yeah,
So
sorry about not mentioning that
no,
part.
no,
Yeah,
no, yeah, that's fine. So they're on F tier now. So that so it's a very low. So the committee feels that there's a very low chance that they may jump to either TNA or WWE.
yeah, those are the
Effectively,
real options.
yeah,
Yeah.
or I guess New Japan, but I don't think anyone's really thinking that. So here's the thing with them. Matt Hardy, because I think we got to just talk to them both at the same time, because I think people think like right now, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy are potentially going to leave at the same time. So like there's some rumors that maybe Matt might sign a short-term deal or just stick
Mm-hmm.
around for a per appearance with AEW just until Jeff is free, and then they would go
Yeah.
together because they really are a this they're worth more together than they are apart,
Yes. Yeah.
especially at this point. And so the question then just becomes, it's like, looking at my flow chart, would
Hmm.
AEW or WWE value them more?
Um,
I don't know.
I don't know either at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. And
So
and
yeah.
here's the thing. I know a lot of people, and I think I think there's a lot of people, and I think you as well said that you're not exactly sure how valuable they would be to say WWE.
Well, I think that there is value to see. This is where it becomes like we should talk about them together, but there's something about them that should be talked about separately. Which is that like Matt is more value right now than I think Jeff has. Um,
And I
I think
disagree. I would say the other way.
gotcha. Oh wow. Well, that's intriguing.
We're gonna have a fun. We'll have a fun talk here.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's valuable about Matt is his mind and his booking strategy and things like that. I think that he could have value, not just as a wrestler, but as a producer, as a coach. I think that Jeff has had some issues, and to the point that that's why he left WWE to begin with, why he had a suspension in AEW. He's had some personal issues, so I think that right now, I think Jeff might be more of a riskier decision to put value into him to commit to him than I think Matt is at the current moment. But how do you feel?
I just don't necessarily think that the track record we've seen, like WWE necessarily, and I don't mean this in a negative way to WWE. I just mean this in that I'm just seeing what I'm seeing, that they are not a company that necessarily has a problem pushing people that have, several DUIs and
Yeah,
issues with DUIs. I mean, one of their biggest projects right now is the Usos. And granted, Jey
yeah,
Uso is not the one that's necessarily had these issues, but
yeah.
I'm
Of
not gonna
course, but it's a
we're
similar.
not gonna pretend that Jimmy Uso is not pushed.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of discussion, I suppose, when we're looking at the two. And of course, it should be mentioned, of course, that Jimmy's is off and on issue throughout time. It's not just one time or anything like that. Just like Jeff has had issues throughout time.
Yes, and I think that WWE is a company that definitely values the moments, and
Yeah,
big returns are the moment. And I think that they are
yeah,
willing to pay, maybe not a massive amount of money, but I think there's a good chance they'd be willing to pay more money than AEW is willing to pay to have the Hardys back,
yeah,
especially when I don't necessarily know that the Hardys have much more value to AEW at this point. I think
yeah,
there's a lot of Hardy fatigue when
yeah,
in the AEW fan base. I think they've kind of, they kind of groan when they see them. I think they've done everything they really need to do there, or can do there. And I just don't know that I think the WWE fan
yeah,
base is a little bit more forgiving and would like, they have the nostalgia a little bit more
yeah.
with I think that they would be a little more of I honestly I'm going to go ahead and say I think WWE would value them more than AEW.
Okay, yeah, and actually, there's a promotion out there that we mentioned one little moment on in
Yep.
this conversation. TNA. I think that TNA would possibly have the most value seating in them.
Yes. And then I would agree. But
Yeah,
I think the big issue right now is TNA is in a real state of flux right now. We don't even know
yes,
like what they're offering. There's talk they may be just offering per appearance deals to some of their
hmm
talents. So are they willing to, pay the Hardys what they would need? Would they be able to outbid WWE if WWE is interested?
I think that TNA would come back with an offer for them.
Yeah. I think
Um,
the broken mat stuff had its niche popularity. I will
mhm.
push back on it being like some big difference maker. I think it had a lot of potential on getting a lot of clicks and links and people talking about it online. I don't know that it was necessarily a financial boom to TNA in any way or brought a bunch
Yeah.
of viewers in, but it's still something that, would
Well,
get people talking. It would get some buzz.
well, I would say also that the bigger thing I think with the Broken Mat is not necessarily the value it gave TNA, but the value it gave to the Hardys because it revitalized their career to the point where they went back to WWE and were able to run those greatest hits for a little bit too.
Yeah. And
Um,
I don't think necessarily Matt Hardy specifically, because he was there longer and had a lot more. He had a lot more going on in AEW, a lot different angles, stuff with Private
yes,
Party. He did the broken Matt stuff when he first came in, and then eventually he brought back Jeff Hardy. And I don't know that necessarily any of his stuff really clicked in the same way that maybe it would have in TNA. And I
yeah,
think that's kind of why I also think that maybe AEW is just not necessarily going to throw a whole lot of money at him. I think if it's a reasonable amount, they'll keep him around just because, I think he does have value just as a name that people
yeah.
know. I just we'll just see. This isn't it. Like I said, this is a cool one to look at because he's one where I
Yes.
don't think anyone necessarily really, really wants him. So it'll be fun to see where he goes.
Yeah, and actually, let's dovetail here to talk about our next addition to the tier list because it deals with that company that we just mentioned that might see more value in the Hardys than WWE or AEW might see in the Hardys. We're talking about the Motor City Machine Guns. They were just added to the tier list this week, all the way up at B tier of all places.
Yeah, I voted for B tier
I
personally.
I did too. Yeah.
I mean,
I think that right now there is a higher than 50-50 shot of them going somewhere else and signing somewhere big.
yeah. And I think obviously the most logical landing spot would be AEW in the sense that
Hmm.
they are now in a position uh where they've wrestled in AEW before
Yeah.
and they're going to be more well known by that audience.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that being able to go back to New Japan would be a big plus as well. I think New Japan
Oh
would like
yeah.
to use them again. And just the idea of having another tag team right now in AEW when the tag division is slowly being rebuilt after it was kind of pushed to the side for a long time, especially
Yes.
throughout the last year. I think that's a positive thing. And even in going back to Ring of Honor, I mean, they may have some benefit. They'd be beneficial in Ring of Honor if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, so to set the scene a little bit here of what we're discussing with them, this is Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley. Uh, they've both been doing a bunch of they've been sprinkling in a lot of singles work in TNA in the past few years here, especially Chris Sabin with that excellent X Division triple threat on Hard to Kill back in January. Um, their contracts seem to be up pretty soon with TNA. Some people have said that they've been inquired by TNA if they would switch to a per appearance deal rather than a full contract, which is quite interesting to hear about. It sounds like they had signed a new deal with TNA as of March 23rd of last year. So, if it's a 1 year deal and their contract's about to come up, possible that today, right now, their contract is up with TNA. It's possible.
Yeah.
Um, Shelley commented on coming to terms with the notion that he should be wrestling full time. Because Alex Shelley, if people aren't aware, has a full time job outside of wrestling, and that's something that he's really valued the what you call it the filming schedule for TNA.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned that he has to look at it as kind of like a give and take of, can I work wrestling full time? Is the pay that I'm going to get from wrestling going to match what I'm getting for my full time job otherwise? And he's looking at it as kind of contingency plan. So it's not necessary that Alex Shelley will be looking for a full time contract anyway. He might be looking for a company that allows for a little bit more freedom of their movements and their things that they do outside of the company, which, as we mentioned earlier in the program, that's kind of AEW's angle.
Yeah.
One final note, of course, is that LX Shelley filed for trademarks on Motor City Machine Guns and MCMG, which, if we recall, recently with how trademark filing is gone with Okada and Mercedes Moné, might be signaling that they're going to be leaving TNA, leaving their current promotion, rather.
Yep. And that's why I think that they're at B tier. I think that's a perfect spot for them.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think that they're going? So you think that they're going to possibly end up in AEW, ROH, or New Japan, that kind of orbit?
Yeah, I do. I think that's probably going to be their landing spot. It just seems like that. I don't think they're going to be that expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to be fairly easy to get. I think that they're, as you said, I think they're someone that's going to benefit that freedom. And I don't know that WWE is going to be that interested in Motor City Machine Guns. It just doesn't,
Yeah.
because they're at the late stage of their career at this point. They're
Yes.
the latter half at minimum, and I don't think that WWE has necessarily demonstrated a commitment to tag wrestling in the way that AEW has, even with AEW's tag division kind of, having less focus
Mm-hmm.
over the last year. And just looking at TNA, I don't think they're going to stay there if the issues are, what it sounds like in terms of pay. I mean, if
Yeah,
I think they're going to go where they'll get the best pay, and that might end up being AEW, even if it is just on Ring of Honor.
yeah. And to point out, Chris Sabin is 42, Alex Shelley is 40, so that's part of the conversation that we were having about WWE. It's possible that they won't see long-term value in bringing them in. They might go into a slot kind of like where the Good Brothers are kind of working right now the NXT circuit,
Hmm.
rather than working on the main roster tag circuit. Um, yeah, I forgot what you just said. There was something that you just said that triggered something in my mind, and then I forgot. So
Well,
that,
I think we more or less hit on it anyway, so I think we're good
yeah,
there.
yeah, and maybe that's a cue for us possibly wanting to take a break here before we get into the two other people that were taken off the tier list this week, that are both from Stardom, and we want to talk about Stardom a little bit, right?
Yep, let's talk about it.
Okay, so let's take a quick break, and we will be right back to the WrestleWatch podcast. Cool. Welcome back to the WrestleWatch podcast. This is Ryan, and I think Doug wanted to go in depth a little bit here about Stardom and the two names that we've taken off the tier list here this week, right?
Yeah, I think this is important. Just because of everything that's going on right now, and also just in terms of like making some clarity on what it means to be on the tier list and what it means to
Mm-hmm.
be off it. I think that even us in the committee were like struggling with this a little bit just because it's hard to tell like what Rossy Pro, or we keep calling it Rossy Pro, that's weird, but Rossy's new promotion, what it's actually going to be. But there
Yes.
was two names that were removed. One was Syuri, and the other one was Suzu Suzuki.
Okay. And why were those two names removed this week?
So Syuri is an interesting one because I believe it was Dave who initially reported that Syuri is not leaving Stardom. I think it was Dave. I could be
Yeah,
wrong on
so
that.
it was Dave Meltzer using his certain source.
Yes. And just to be clear, Fumi is Dave's Japan source when it comes to Stardom, who gets all of his information pretty much directly from Rossy. So everything that we hear from Dave, I try to keeping the understanding that we're probably hearing it from Rossy directly.
Yeah, and so based on that, there might be a grain of salt of how rosy the future is.
Yes. And with that, what we've heard so far is that there are 5 people that are leaving Stardom and joining this new promotion with Rossy.
Yes, yeah, and
And
that was Tokyo Sports that reported this, right?
yes, and then I'll get back to the 2 people that were removed from the tier list in a moment, but I just want to kind of read through these names. So we
Mm-hmm.
have Utami Hayashishita, who is genuinely an ace. Like was the I would argue the ace of Stardom for a long time. Like especially during the dark times of COVID, she was on her rise. She uh came in, I want to say 2018, and was just seen as like this young prospect out of nowhere, just having great matches. Her Rose, she really took off and made a name for herself when she had
Mm-hmm.
those great matches with Syuri during her title reign. Uh, Dave went over the 5 stars on one of them. Um, and then you have Mirai, who has been I would say, I think it's fair to call her an upper mid carder at this point. She's been heavily pushed as a prospect. She became the 2-time Cinderella tournament winner, and I would argue is someone who you could build around if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yuzuki is interesting, and I don't really have a lot to say on her because she literally just debuted in like November or October. So she's just a rookie who decided to jump. And then the final one is Mai Sakurai, who is another Donna Del Mondo uh, member. I'd call her for a firm mid carder who is also jumping. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the 4 that are jumping for sure. And then Julia as well. But the issue with Julia is we don't know how long she's staying, because every indication is she's just going to stay there, help set up the promotion with Rossy, and then she's going to WWE.
Yeah, yeah, it's been kind of mixed at times about how long, if and all those kinds of things. But every single time that anybody has been reporting out Julia, it's like, yeah, well, it's going to be WWE ultimately.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Syuri and Suzu, it kind of echoes what the thoughts are on this new promotion, because Syuri we had at B tier.
Yes, yeah, we had her very far up. Yeah, so it's pretty surprising to see her sticking around in Stardom. Now, part of it, of course, was that we were thinking that it's possible even that she just leaves Japan.
Yeah. And then Suzu Suzuki, same thing. We kind of thought that, she's going to stick with Julia,
Yeah,
and leave. But also, I think there was I do think there was a little bit of miscommunication within the committee on what it means to actually be a jump. And some people, and I keep kind of falling into this trap too, where I would think like this new Rossy promotion would be considered a jump, when in actuality, we're not doing that. We're not considering that a jump. So
yeah,
even if they did leave and go to the Rossy promotion, we wouldn't consider that a jump, just because we don't know what the promotion is. We don't know if it's big enough to be considered a destination that would actually pay these people. So that's another reason why they were both removed to the delete. But even with
yeah,
that in mind, the fact that both Suzu Suzuki and Syuri are not leaving Stardom, at least now. I mean, Syuri doesn't sound like she's planning to leave Stardom, and Suzu, from everything I'm reading, it doesn't look like there's any indication she wants to leave now either.
yeah,
Those two are a big blow to whatever Rossy's trying to do, because the names that he has right now,
hmm
with Utami as the big main eventer.
yeah.
You can maybe argue Mirai could be turned into one, but it's like that isn't exactly a core roster that I could build a promotion around.
Yeah, it's been interesting reading specifically, as we mentioned, the differences in reporting from Dave Meltzer and his sourcing versus what other people have been reporting, because it seems that there is a belief that there's going to be this core roster of joshis, of Japanese talent, and then they're going to fill in the gaps with international people. And the question that I have is, who are these international people? Where are they going to come from? What it causes so many questions about what is the structure of this new Rossy promotion, and it's a big open question.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get some answers relatively soon.
Yes.
Supposedly by the summer.
Oh yeah, that was Sonny's bio on Twitter was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm with Stardom until the end of March, and then coming soon, a new promotion by the summer."
And
And
if you
I'm
don't
like,
know, Sonny is Stardom's notorious social media manager, who is clearly planning to leave Stardom and go join this new promotion with Rossy.
yes. So it's kind of one of those things that everything that I hear that's from the Dave source like conglomerate and Rossy's kind of tendrils, I put a little bit of a grain of salt of this seems like one step too rosy to put a pun on things. And it seems one step too optimistic
Yeah.
about what the prospects of what's going to happen with this promotion is. So yeah, and I think was it Utami that she had previously done a little bit of an excursion on the American independent circuit, but now is saying that she just wants to work Japan.
Yeah, she doesn't want to leave Japan.
Yeah.
She did a couple GCW shots,
Mhm.
and then she did work Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
now
It was.
she doesn't want to leave Japan, which honestly is a valid understanding for a lot of these people. If they don't want to leave the country, that we're not going to see them jump, because she's someone who absolutely could have been a star. Like
Oh yeah.
she's a star.
Yeah. And then
And yeah,
yeah, and when we look at what's possible with the division of the kinds of talent that are going to, or maybe the structure is another way of putting it, the structure of how Rossy looks at making his promotion, with the way that he was running Stardom, of not really wanting to do partnerships with certain promotions in certain other countries, or even even New Japan. He didn't really love doing cross promotional stuff with New Japan. He didn't love all those kinds of things. And then we look at the way that post Rossy, how Stardom right now already is starting to do those cross promotional things. Look at the card for the Stardom show in Philadelphia, where we're starting to see AEW talent appear on the shows. We're starting to see Stardom talent appearing on other shows. We just had Mina against Anna Jay, we talked about earlier in the show on ROH. That was on the big business show where the current new president of Stardom was announced as having a deal with AEW now, that they're actually working together. So I think when we're looking at these things, and Utami is saying, I want to work in Japan, that might be the difference kind of the people that are looking at leaving and going to the roster promotion are people that maybe don't really have an interest in working in America on the independent circuit. That might be a factor in there. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's definitely could be the case.
mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing as we're looking at what Stardom has become now, or what is going to be, even if we assume that Mayu Iwatani eventually leaves,
yeah, I think it's fair to suggest, yeah.
Yeah, I think that once her deal is up, I could see her leaving and going to this promotion with Rossy. And I understand the way Rossy typically has booked prior to the Bushiroad buyout is, it is based on what he described. He would have like a core group of Japanese talent, and then he would just cycle in foreigners for tours, like for a month at a time, where they would eventually build to, whoever the ace in Japan is, eventually having a title match at Korakuen Hall with the biggest foreigner they brought in, and then eventually that foreigner would lose, and then that would be it. And that was very common. Now in Stardom, though, you take a look at who they have. They really didn't lose anyone that important outside of Utami. So they have Tam Nakano is staying. Saori Ano is staying. You have Natsupoi is staying as well, so they can kind of keep that tag team together. You have Momo Watanabe didn't go anywhere. Like the core, and obviously Micah is, as the champ, is sticking around, and she was pretty vocal that she's not going.
Yeah, and when you also look at the fact of, like, if you just look at who's leading all the factions right now in Stardom, well, except for Utami and well, rest in peace, Donna Demando, Julia, everybody else is staying, right?
Yeah, because
of all the leaders,
Syuri's staying as leader of God's Eye. Losing Mirai, who is on the rise up, is part of like the number 2 God's Eye wrestler, but she's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
that's, like I said, as you said, the core audience is still there. Starlight Kid is not going anywhere. She's
getting big.
She's sort of the de facto head of Oedo Tai. Maybe not entirely, because I think that it's weird because Oedo Tai doesn't really have a clear leader at this point. But Starlight Kid, I would argue, is clearly like the most popular wrestler of that group.
Yeah,
and we're in a situation right now where we're just not seeing a lot, because Mina Shirakawa is the leader of her faction now since they broke off of Cosmic Angels. They have a core. They haven't lost anyone irreplaceable.
Yeah, I'm looking at the people that have appeared in the PWI Women's 100. Now it's the 250 since 2018 when it was founded. And I think that there's 7 names here, and only 2 of them are leaving to go to this new promotion of the Stardom athletes. We have Mayu Iwatani, Syuri, Tam Nakano, Saya Kamitani, is that correct?
And Saya Kamitani, we just found out she's not going anywhere either.
Yeah, and Starlight Kid is the other one, and Julia are the other 2. So yeah, it's only Utami and Julia that are leaving of these 7 names that are the top athletes of Stardom for the past 5, 6, 7 years.
And Saya is probably going to be the person who just takes over Queen's Quest, which is Utami's faction. Like, she's perfectly positioned to do that. So it's Stardom had a very deep back bench, so they're really not going to miss a beat.
Yeah,
and at one point there was concern that is Stardom going to exist anymore?
Yeah, and we're also looking at, again, when we're talking about the things about the possible new partnership work that they're going to be doing. Stephanie Vekor of CMLL just won the Strong Women's Championship from Julia. Looks like she is going to be working the Stardom show in Philadelphia, and maybe potentially what was it, Windy City Riot?
That was actually already announced shortly before.
Already announced?
Before we recorded, they announced that it's going to be, or I think they announced that it's going to be at the show, but it's going to be Stephanie Vacour versus Azumi. In Chicago.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, so that's happening.
Yeah, and I think that Stephanie could retain the title on that one.
I would imagine she would,
especially if she's going to be at the Philly show. I would say that will happen after it. So or before. Actually, no, I reversed that. Philly show happens before Windy City Riot. Still, point is, I think that it's possible that when we're looking at that, we're looking at Mariah May and Willow Nightingale being booked for the Philadelphia show. Mina's worked a Ring of Honor, is kind of teasing stuff about maybe Anna Jay will come over to Stardom for a little bit. It's starting to look like, hey, like even if we lose like 2 of 7 of our aces, we'll be also able to bring in some of those foreigners that you were talking about to kind of be the next challenger for whoever the next ace of Stardom will be.
Yeah, and I think that clearly something changed backstage in Stardom to kind of quell some of the fears and concerns that a lot of the Stardom talent have, because it's possible that, this was just like all made up and that these people weren't actually ever going to leave in the first place. But I don't know that I necessarily buy that. I feel that maybe something did happen that made a lot of talent happier. And it could be that there are more opportunities and connections to work in America, which, not to say that matters to a lot of these people, but the reality is the yen is down right now, and money talks, and being able to take these American bookings is beneficial.
Yeah, especially when we're looking at vis-a-vis Tokyo Joshi Pro, where they're very open with letting the talent go and take American bookings. And well, a lot of those people, they've been getting very over and a lot of money off of the American indie market.
Yeah, and if AEW is willing to help them get visas so that they can actually do it legally, that's a big benefit. Yeah,
and it's also with CMLL for that matter.
Absolutely.
I think when we were discussing this a little bit ago with committee folks, one of the points was like maybe what Rossy was offering in terms of money and booking wasn't as major as what Stardom was offering. Maybe some of the people were afraid of alienating Stardom if the Rossy promotion just kind of fails, for that matter. Talking about those booking strategies, I think that the big changes that have happened is Rossy leaving is part one of why now Stardom is open to working these partnerships with other promotions. But part two is Mercedes Moné. I honestly, I think when you look at the fact that Okada, not AEW Okada, not New Japan Okada, but Stardom Okada, that he was at Big Business pay-per-view, not pay-per-view, special TV show to ring in the introduction of Mercedes Moné formally into AEW, it kind of signals to you like, yeah, it looks like that there's this big push from Mercedes that is getting all these partnerships to happen between Stardom, CMLL, and AEW.
Yeah, and I think to keep in mind as well, the first time Mercedes left WWE, and she talked to Rossy in Stardom, and Rossy walked away just because she wanted too much money.
Yeah.
And then Bushiroad stepped in and said, no, we'll pay it. We'll pay for her. So I think that's part of it as well. I think I think it could be part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to in trying to see who will be leaving ultimately to the Rossy promotion, what it looks like ultimately. Those are all things that we're going to be keeping an eye on here at WrestleWatch. We might not necessarily have people joining the tier list for those things, but I think in the future, once we have a solid idea of what this new promotion looks like, we'll have a nice discussion about that.
Absolutely.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about today, Doug?
I think we covered everything.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. How about we leave now?
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for listening to the WrestleWatch podcast. Of course, as a reminder, WrestleWatch is available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. And make sure to follow us on Twitter for updates throughout the week about the changes to the tier list. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. See ya.